second-hand clothes online can have some frustrating drawbacks. If an item turns out to have some unexpected features or this doesn't fit properly, there's not a lot you can do. But when Vinted gives you lemons, you can always cut it up and reconstruct it into an orange. We've had a mini heat wave here in the UK, by which I mean we had 2 days where 12 degrees was made to feel like 16 by the sun. And in spite of the immediate temperature plummet, seriously, what even is spring? I am now, of course, dreaming of picnics in meadows bursting with wildflowers, bumblebees buzzing lazily in the sun, and frolicking in ditzy floral cottagecore dream dresses. To realise this fantasy, I hopped onto Vinted and picked up this beautiful dress. But when it arrived, I found that the fabric was almost like tent fabric. It was sweaty, crunchy, and definitely not frolic friendly. The thing with Vinted is you can very rarely return something as it depends on the seller. But I love the shape of it and the vibe. So instead of just throwing it away or inflicting it upon somebody else by reselling it, I decided to chop it up and turn it into something that I'd actually wear. So the plan is to just unpick where the sleeves are along the sides and everything, and then get the pieces and lay them out and see what that looks like. It's about now I should probably tell you that I am not a professional sewist. I'm self-taught and still learning, and as such, I might pick up some odd habits that might upset or confuse some more experienced sewists and makers. If this is you, consider yourself warmly welcomed, but also warned. I started by unpicking all the seams, trying to pay attention to how it was constructed as I went, so that I'm not flailing about in the dark when I put it back together in the new fabric. I was also careful to pull out and save the elastic that was in the original dress's sleeves to use later. Waste not, want not after all. Then I laid out the pieces onto pattern paper. I could have just used the fabric itself as a pattern, but I wanted to make a few changes to the general silhouette and to the length of the dress, and that's easier to do on paper. While doing this, I roughly added a 1cm seam allowance on all edges except for the neckline. You'll see why I omitted it later. And I also added a few extra inches to the length because I am a tall bean. And after a quick snack break, I cut the pieces out ready to use with the mock-up fabric. The original idea was to go rummaging through my cabbage basket to find some appropriately large pieces of fabric to use to make up the mock-up, and I thought I'd done really well with what I had. But I ended up pulling an old bedsheet out of the airing cupboard instead, because holy crap, do balloon sleeves use up a lot of fabric. First, I stitched the fronts and backs right sides together at the shoulders. I'm not being super neat or careful here, as I was mostly just trying to confirm my guesses about its construction, rather than make a wearable garment at this point. Next, I took the sleeves and added an ease/gather stitch all along the top curved edge by choosing the long stitch length on my machine. You could double this up or do it by hand, but I'm lazy, so... On the straight edge of the sleeve, I roughly folded it over to make a tunnel for the elastic to go through. Then threaded it through and stitched it in place at both ends with a zigzag stitch. Matching up the edges of the sleeve to the side seams, I attached the sleeve, pulling on the gather stitches as I go to make it fit into the shoulder properly and create volume. The final part of the mock-up was to turn the dress inside out and fold the sleeves right sides together along the long edge. And then, after stitching along the length of the sleeve and down the side, making sure that sleeve seam was tucked into the side seam of the dress, the mock-up was done. And it looks terrible, but that's okay because I was doing it to get an idea of how it's supposed to go together. I've only done one sleeve because I got all the information I needed from just doing the one, and I didn't want to have to put in and take out the elastic both times. On the sleeves, I'm happy with the shape down here, but I think I need to make sure the gathers are more concentrated on the top of the shoulder, so it has a bit more like hoof at the top. I think I'm going to add a little bit more flare to the bottom of the skirt pattern so that when it's cinched in with the belt, which is how I'm going to wear it, it doesn't look as like tubular. So I actually waited until I've completed the mock-up before I ordered any fabrics. I wanted to make sure it would work. I went onto Etsy to find some and I ended up finding this absolutely beautiful green and pink cotton poplin, which I have linked in the description below. It arrived just a few days later. Then after washing and ironing, then repeating roughly the same process as before, this time around was slightly different because the back panel was now in 2 pieces. So I stitched those 2 back panels together first, leaving about half a hand length at the top to make space for the head to go through, just like the original dress had. And top stitch the loose seam in place, reinforcing the end with a little back stitch. Then it was business as usual, sewing the shoulders together first, gathering, stitching and then adding elastic to the sleeves, easing the sleeves into the shoulders and then stitching up the sides, pressing seams open as I went. Then I cut a long strip of fabric about 3 centimeters wide, folded it like so and ironed it into shape. I then pinned this to the raw neck of the dress and top stitched it closed to bind the neck of the dress and leaving 2 long strings to tie into a bow at the back and keep the neck closed. To finish, I hemmed the dress to where I wanted it to sit, and just like that, the dress was done. I thought I finished making the dress last night, but I realised if I'm supposed to be improving on the original dress, why haven't I added pockets? So plan is now, get home, have a cup of tea, and put pockets on the dress. To make the pockets, I started off by putting it back on and pin marking the side seams with roughly where I wanted the pockets to go, making sure there was enough space for my hands at their widest point. This came out to about 12 centimeters. I then seam ripped between the pins. Using that measurement as a jumping off point, I drew out the shape I wanted my pocket to be on some leftover pattern paper. Because I'm using my phone to film, I had to make a cardboard cutout to use as a reference for the size, but it all worked out in the end. I then cut out 4 pieces of fabric. In an attempt to make the pockets less obvious if it gaped open, I'm putting the pattern fabric on the back of the dress so you can see it from the front and the opposite for the pink. I then stitched the straight edges of the pocket to each side of the seam, being careful not to close up the hole. Next, I stitched the 2 pocket flaps together, and for extra reinforcement I used the rolled hem foot on my machine and went over it again. Now, did somebody mention frolicking? enjoyed making this project, and I'm definitely be wearing this more over the spring and summer. Though if I were to make another one in a different pattern, I think I would probably put something on the waist, like a smocking or something, to bring it in so I don't have to wear a belt with it. Add gauze or add even more flare to make it even swishier. And I'd definitely give a bit more space for my hand to go into the pockets, because every time I had to put something in, I'm actually stuck right now, I'd have to wiggle a bit to get it in and out, so that's probably what I'd change. Other than that though, I really love the result. I think it's very cottagecore and spring and just everything I set out for it to be. During the process of making it, I definitely learned a few things, namely that balloon sleeves use a lot of fabric, but also that pockets are way less intimidating than I thought they were, and if you add way more fabric than you need to the bottom of it, it makes hemming so much easier. Thank you so much for joining me on my little sewing adventure. I wish I could tell you how frequently I'll be making videos like this, but you can always subscribe and turn notification alerts to know when I do. In the meantime, you can also find me on Instagram to see more of my creations or just have a little chat. But for now, it's goodbye, and I hope you have a lovely spring.